If you're looking to get back into running, being able to perform a single leg squat with good control in your pelvis, knee, and foot can be important for being able to make sure that you can meet the demands of the activity. Now, that being said, sometimes jumping straight into a single leg squat can be really challenging. So let's talk through a couple different ways that we can work on building up to that challenge, as well as maybe some other things that maybe we need to clean up or work on to help improve that pattern. So first, we can think about how sometimes when people go to work a single leg squat, they maybe just kind of go through the range that they can control. The downside of this is that you're really kind of limited by the ability to be able to not only eccentrically lengthen through that tissue as you go to lower down, but also being able to stabilize your pelvis and your foot and knee as you go to stand on one leg. So what we can do is we can take out the instability component and kind of unload your body a little bit to help you be able to go through a greater range, which can then help get you more out of the exercise. So one way to do it is simply to unload yourself with a band. You can use a stretchy band, you can use something more rigid. People will have different experiences with those differences. So just kind of experiment and see what feels the best to you. So what we can do here is you want to make sure it's something that's pretty sturdy. You can even go even heavier than this. And then you're going to be on that leg, and you can start off with having that other foot kind of down as like a little kickstand. So that's going to help take away the wobbles a little bit with it. Then what we can think about is that the band here is going to help unload you as you go to sit down into that range. Now you can either push straight back up from there, or once you kind of get down here, you can put the other foot down and then use both legs to push you back up. But the idea of the band is it kind of helps you sink down into it. So it's kind of a slow, controlled lowering versus just being here and being like, oh, I hope it works out, kind of a thing for it. The nice thing with the band is now you're kind of spring-loaded to help get up and out of it. So that can be a nice option too, if you're working on kind of getting out of the hole, is to use the band instead of the straps to help the band kind of assist with that pop back out, just like you could use that other leg to help assist with it. The other negative with the more rigid straps is sometimes people might have the tendency to kind of pull with their upper body, which can be helpful with thinking about the connection of lats into hips. But if you're constantly kind of doing all the movement with your arms and your back, then maybe you're not actually using your glutes at their full potential. We really want that good power out to then get a good position to then sink back down into with it. So next thing we can do is we can use a slider here. So the slider is going to help unload and help be that kickstand. So we can do it in a couple different ways. I can do more of a reverse lunge type of move. Again, you can always hold onto a countertop or a foam roller vertically or something like that to give a little bit more stability. But I can think about, okay, my right leg is going to be along for the ride because of me loading my left leg. So I'm going to sit down and back into this left hip. As I lower down, my right leg comes back. Now I'm going to drag that left leg back and push the ground away to come back up. So I'm trying to not do a whole bunch of pulling forward with that right leg. You might feel a little bit of a scissor action, but we're making sure that that left leg is doing majority of the work. So again, I'm going down, making sure I'm not reaching back, right? So you see how if I lead with that right leg, that it affects my left hip loading. But thinking about sitting down into a tiny chair underneath that left glute, and then again, pull, push to come back forwards. You can add in some reciprocal arm movement. Sometimes that actually helps. So rather than being static holding onto something, so as I come down, I can pull my left arm back and reach my right arm forward for this nice cross connection. And I can pull my right arm back and reach the left arm through. So now we're getting this benefit of this kind of ringing action of rib cage going one way, pelvis going the other way, and then I'm getting that right kind of retraction of my shoulder blade to help my left hip with that hip extension for it. You can experiment a little bit with where you go with that slide. So if I'm going here, I'm just working purely in that sagittal plane. And actually, let me show you one more time from the side here. So as I'm going down, I'm making sure that I'm not just loading here, but the benefit of reaching back is it can help me sit back into that glute to help load it to come back up. Sometimes people have a hard time with those single leg squats or even just sitting and standing out of a chair because they're using all their quads and it'll feel like, oh, my ankles run out of range of motion. But in reality, it's because they're not sitting into their hips and using their hips enough. Now, we want to make sure that we don't go to the extent where all of my weight shifts back. So now I'm not centered over that leg, and I'm gonna have a really hard time coming out of it because I'm unable to use those quads and that kind of vertical push to get out of it. So again, I'm thinking about the legs sliding back to help me kind of sit back, but then I'm still lowering straight down over my left foot and then pressing straight back off of that left foot. Now, if I go to the sides, I can use this to kind of help turn my pelvis toward the front leg and help it sit back. So this can be helpful if I think about as this right leg sliding out. Again, I'm not sliding to begin with, but I'm kind of sitting down and sliding out at the same time with my right hip turning towards the left. That can help me sit back, but maybe this actually feels a little bit better than kind of just going straight back here. That can maybe be someone who tends to kind of shift too far back, and then so it can encourage some of the sit back, but then still staying over that foot and kind of playing with that angle. So I can either slide straight out to the side, or I can slide more at 2 o'clock. I could even slide at 1 o'clock. That's gonna get a little bit more challenging for the hip flexors on that right side. So if you're someone that's a little bit more hip flexor dominant, then maybe you wouldn't wanna do that one here. The other benefit of sliding out to the side is I'm kicking in a little bit of this right glute med. I'm getting some eccentric lengthening of my adductors here, or more like positional lengthening of my adductors here, which can help me with getting onto this left leg, okay? So I gotta think about this right leg kind of pushing off, helps me get over and into that left leg, which then helps me be centered to lower down into it and then push back off of it. So experimenting what one side needs versus the other, or maybe both of those variations feel good to you. Now, we wanna make sure too that maybe instead of just working the squat pattern, we need to work on the pelvis in different planes of motion. This might entail working on some rotation where I'm pulling in here with my adductor, feeling the glutes lengthen the backside. I'm pushing away with the glutes, and then my adductors are lengthening here. That knee is staying pointed straight ahead, and the back leg's just kind of along for the ride. I might do some hip shifts where I get into a little bit of a hinge, and I'm driving a knee down, driving a knee up. Again, feeling as this hip comes down, that's lengthening through that left glute, then that left glute is pushing off. My left knee doesn't wiggle in or out or straighten forwards or back with it. That can really help kind of, again, center that pelvis to then be able to work in that sagittal plane. We can think if we're kind of off center, how now this is gonna be hard for me to sit straight back. So by kind of working through that full plane of motion and kind of biasing a little bit more towards the range that's challenging, you can then kind of come back to being able to go into that sagittal plane more easily. Now, some other areas that can get sticky, particularly at kind of the bottom part of that squat, is if everything's kind of all sticky and gunky under here. So working on some ideas where we're unsticking the sacrum here, getting some eccentric length through that proximal hamstring here, working on finding the hamstrings without the glutes, and some unsticking sacrum ideas can really help that kind of final stage in the lengthening in the bottom of a single leg squat. We can also think about how we might need to address what's happening in the shin and in the foot. So if you have a tibia that's externally rotated, that's going to be hard to load on and cause a lot of knee pain. You're going to feel imbalanced with it. If the foot can't unlock and pronate or supinate, that's also going to affect it. So I'll link a few videos here where we can check out some of those other areas and experiment some ways where by fixing other spots can help kind of set your hips up for success to then challenge it and load it in that sagittal plane.